Good morning, Anchor Point kids. I was wondering, did you know God created this big, beautiful, amazing world for us? And what is the most exciting place that you have ever visited? Why don't you go ahead and yell it out on the count of 3, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Wow, those are some pretty exciting places to travel and visit, isn't it? Well, in our missionary story, Mary Slessor loves to travel and go visit new places too and tell more people about Jesus. And she was so excited. She had already traveled to Duketown and Old Town, and now she wanted to go deeper into the jungle to be able to tell more people about Jesus. She wanted to visit the OK Young people. They were a very wicked and dangerous people, but Mary knew that is exactly why God wanted her to go. They needed to hear about God's love. So one day, Mary's friend, who was a chief, let her borrow his canoe plus 30 men to help paddle this canoe. So, on a cold, wet, rainy day, Mary and her 5 children and another missionary man named Mr. Bishop climbed into the canoe and started paddling. Should we pretend like we're paddling with them? Go ahead and get your paddle out. Here we go. Let's paddle up the river with them. Good job, you guys. Well, they paddled all day long, and when they finally it was dark, and they got to where they needed to go, they brought the canoe to the shore and banked it there, but they still had to walk 3 miles in order to get to the village of Ikenji. Now, none of the paddlers wanted to walk through the jungle at night, but Mary was determined to get to the village that night because, you see, the next day was Sunday, and Mary did not want to travel and work on Sundays. So she said, fine, I will go. And she had her oldest son, who is 11 years old, lead the way in front of them. And then all the children filed behind, and Mary was in the back carrying a baby, plus some of the supplies that she could carry with her. And they traveled out through the jungle. The children were very tired and hungry and crying as they walked. So Mary sang songs to them while they were walking through the jungle, and finally they made it. Now, you see, usually when Mary got to a village, there was lots of people that would come out to greet her, and it would be exciting and lots of commotion, and it would be a big event. But this was a very strange night because when they got to the village, there was nobody there. It was really quiet. Shh. You see, there was only a couple people in the village. And so they helped Mary find a hut that she could stay in while she was there. And another person ran off to go tell the chief that Mary had arrived. She found out that the rest of the village was away at a funeral, and they had no idea when they were going to come back. Well, Mary and the children settled into their hut, but they had wet clothes on from the rain. Their dry clothes were back at the canoe, and so they were very tired and cranky. So Mary sang them some songs in order to help them fall asleep, and she wondered, when was Mr. Bishop and the paddlers going to come with the rest of the supplies? Well, she didn't have to wait too long because Mr. Bishop arrived, and he told her that the paddlers refused to walk through the jungle at night because they were scared. Mr. Bishop brought as many supplies as he could carry with them, including some dry clothes for the children. Now, Mary was really angry at those paddlers for refusing to come. And even though she was wet, even though she was tired, and she couldn't even get her feet back into her boots, she trudged barefoot all the way back to the canoes in order to get those men to help carry the rest of the supplies. And you know what? When she got there, sure enough, they were sound asleep. But she woke those guys right up. She yelled at them and said, "Wake up!" And when they woke up, she helped them carry the rest of those supplies together back to the village at night, back to Ikenja. Mary fell asleep that night in her hut, wondering when the chief was going to come back. Well, the next morning when Mary woke up, she was sore and tired and achy from the night before, but she could not stay in bed because the next day was Sunday. So they all got up and they got dressed and they held a church service. Now, the few people that were in the village there with them had no idea what they were doing, so they kind of stood in the back and watched. Now, a few days later, the people started coming back from the funeral and started coming back to the village. And Chief Edom wasn't too pleased to see Mary in his village, but he still gave her a larger hut to stay in. And Mary began to learn more and more about the people and this tribe and their language. It was not easy living in the village of Akenji. You see, many of the people there drank alcohol, and they were drunk most of the time. Instead of using money in their village to buy things, they traded bottles of alcohol with each other. And they were so drunk that they did terrible, wicked things to each other, and this made Mary very sad. You see, the people of Akenji believed in witchcraft. And so if something bad happened to them or if they got sick, they assumed that somebody else had put a curse on them. Well, this caused a lot of wars to break out because one village would want to get even with another village for placing a curse on them. Mary knew that this violence had to stop, and she met someone who was willing to help her take on this big job. Soon after moving to the village of Akenji, Mary became friends with a woman named Ma'ima. Can you say that with me? Ma'ima. Very good, you guys. Well, Mary had a secret code with her friend Ma'ima. You see, anytime Ma'ima needed Mary to go and help stop a fight from breaking out, she would send a messenger with an empty medicine bottle to Mary. And the messenger would tell Mary, Ma'ima needs some medicine. And Mary would drop whatever she was doing and she would run towards the trouble that was in front of her. Many times, Mary arrived just in time to help stop a war from breaking out. You see, she would sit down with the chiefs and she would help them talk through what the problem was. God used Mary in order to save the lives of many people. Mary began to adjust to life in the village of Akenji. She got to know the people, and she told them all about Jesus, and she helped them whenever they were sick. One day, Mary got a message from another village, and it said, "Come quickly, the chief is about to die. He wants you to take care of him." Well, Mary knew if this chief died, that there would be a lot of people killed in order to honor him at his funeral. So Mary told Chief Edom that she was going to go. And Chief Edom said, don't go. I cannot protect you if you go there. So Mary wasn't sure what to do. So she went to her hut and she prayed. And she asked God, should I go to this chief? Well, when she was done praying, she knew exactly what she needed to do. She packed up her medicine bag and she started walking. Mary and her helper struggled through the rainy jungle. Mary thought about the wild animals that she was going to have to watch out for and the deep rivers that she was going to have to cross. But finally, she arrived at the village and she examined the chief, and immediately she knew exactly what needed to be done. She gave him some medicine and she started praying for him. And soon enough, in a few days, he became better. Now, that made Mary very happy, and his life was saved, but not only his life, but the rest of other people's lives were saved also. The people in the village were amazed that Mary could do this. They wondered, how could she heal people? They thought she had some kind of magic powers or something. But Mary told the people about God and how he was the one who healed them and how he sent his only son to die on the cross to be the savior of their sins. When Mary returned back to her village of Akenji, she knew that God had used her to save the lives of that chief and all those other people. And those people knew that God knew the best way for them to live. You see, when Mary first moved to the village of Akenji, Chief Edom had promised to build her a house and a missions headquarters. But whenever Mary asked Chief Edom about this, he always had some reason why he couldn't start building this house for Mary. So all Mary could do was wait and pray. And that is what she did. And then one day, for some reason unknown to her, the people in the village started building a house for Mary. It was a wonderful house, and it had a wonderful yard, and Mary was very comfortable with this house. But there was one thing that Mary kind of wished. She wished that she could find somebody who would help put the doors and windows into her house. So one day, Mary wrote back to her friends in Scotland to see if there was anyone that'd be willing to come and help put doors and windows onto her house. Well, sometime later, Mary heard in the jungle a man singing. It was a new voice, and it had a Scottish accent. It was Charles Evans. He had traveled all the way from Scotland out into the jungle to go see Mary and help with her doors and windows. As Mary and Charles started talking, Charles realizes that Mary needed a much bigger house and a better house so that she could help more people. Can you pretend with me like we're helping to build the house? Get out your hammer, help build a house and nail in those nails for Mary. Good job, you guys. Well, this new house for Mary would be able to help, she would be able to use it to help more and more people. There were lots of babies and sick people and other people that needed help. And now she could help even more people and tell them about Jesus. God used Mary to do so many amazing things and to help so many people. She helped the sick people to get well. She even helped to stop many wars from breaking out. But even though Mary was doing some amazing things, her life was not easy. You see, Mary got sick a lot while she was there. And once again, she became so sick that she had to leave Calabar. Was Mary going to recover from this sickness? Will she ever get back to the country that she loves? You'll have to come back next week to hear the rest of the story. Thank you so much for listening.